New Testament lesson this morning is from the Gospel of Mark, chapter 13, verses 24 through 37. But in those days, after that suffering, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. And he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day or hour no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Beware, keep alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his slaves in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper be on the watch. Therefore keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or at dawn, or else he may find you asleep when he comes suddenly. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. Here ends the gospel lesson.
This morning I'd like to invite you to join me on a little tour of a gallery. Now, my family and I love going to art museums. And we've been really blessed in our lives to live in places that had some really spectacular museums. We lived in the Bay Area for 4 years, and there's a few good museums in the Bay Area. Then we moved to the Los Angeles area, where they have the famous Getty Museum, which is spectacular. The museum, the building itself, is a part of the display. But then we also got to go to the art museum in Pasadena, which you only know through the Rose Bowl, when they start there at the museum. Chicago was another place we lived nearby, and the Chicago Art Museum is just one of the spectacular ones, as well as was the Milwaukee Art Museum. But my son says that the art museum in Cleveland, which I've yet to go to, is better than the Milwaukee Museum, which is really a beautiful, wonderful museum. Some of you have been to museums, and one of the reasons you go to museums is they sometimes have what's called traveling displays. Maybe they'll have something from Europe or something from Asia that's coming through that piques your interest. And so when you go, they sort of have a theme. So the theme for our adventure out today on this beautiful first Sunday of Advent, the theme is signs and wonders, and in particular, reading the tea leaves. Now we know the phrase reading the tea leaves generally has to do with being able to see what the future holds for us, reading the tea leaves. My wife might say something else. She might say, you really need to learn how to read the room. I hear that from her quite often. Read the room here, Chris. Read the room. Know what's going on. I ask you today to bring your gift of art, your imagination, to be able to go to this gallery of signs and wonders where we're going to read the tea leaves together. And the first room that we go into is a contemporary room, based on a movie, a cinema, where they have these incredible paintings. It's a movie called About Schmidt, starring Jack Nicholson. And so we begin our tour this morning by looking at the first picture. And the picture shows a man, Jack Nicholson, sitting behind a desk, and his desk is completely neat. He's got his briefcase on the desk, already closed. There are no pictures on his desk because they're in a box by him. You look over at the front of his office, which you can see in this particular portrait, and you'll see about 10 filing boxes, neatly wrapped and written on. But more importantly, we see a clock. We see a clock, and the hand is almost at 5 o'clock. Almost. Not quite. Almost at 5 o'clock. What do we learn from this picture? Well, it seems as though that might be his last day. But look at his face. Is he excited? No. In fact, we notice that his face seems to be a little sad. Seems to be almost hopeless. Like, now what? Now what? What do I do with my life now when it hits 5 o'clock? So we move to the next portrait in this gallery, and we see what is obviously a celebration. It's a retirement party. It looks like it's in the lobby of some hotel. Nothing too fancy, but it was okay. And he's holding up a case that has in it a gold watch. And it says, "Thank you for your 40 years of service." That's a long time. 40 years of service. He seems happy, and sitting next to him, looking up, seemingly is his wife. And then we simply move to the next picture, which includes his wife, and they seem to be sitting at a buffet table in an RV that is parked in front of their house. We know that because they're sitting there, and the window is right there by the little table, and you can look out and see their house. And the woman is smiling and happy, and the man looks just like he did at his desk, kind of lost. Now what? Kind of a look. And then the final picture of this part of our journey is the kitchen of their home, where his wife is laying on the floor, motionless. They haven't even taken the RV out yet. So no wonder this seems to be a gallery known as No Hope. What's the point? It's time to get out of this section. Let's see what the next section offers us. And in the next section, we have an artist that is pretty ancient. And the artist's name is Isaiah. So we're into this display that is based on Isaiah chapter 64. And in chapter 64, Isaiah begins with what our first picture looks like. "Oh, that you would tear open the heavens and come down so that the mountains would quake at your presence, as when fire kindles brushwood, and the fire causes water to boil." Now, that's a painting. Now, I think it's important for us to know as we enter this next phase of our gallery hop that we understand how the mind used to picture the world around them in the days of Jesus and in the days of Isaiah. When you walk outside after church today, I want you to just look at the sky. Is it flat? If we're 4 years old, 5 years old, and we're painting a picture in kindergarten, our sky's probably going to be flat. You'll see a line that just goes straight across. But in reality, is it flat? No. You'll see it almost looks like a dome that sits over the earth. That was called the firmament in the days of Isaiah and in the days of Jesus. The firmament was a dome that covered us. It separated us from the heavens, which were above. The sky, the day sky, the night sky, where the sun and the moon and the stars were. Also where there was a lot of water, because that's where you would get rain from. The dome would open and water would flow. Little cracks, little holes that would allow the water to flow through. They believed in these different layers of life. We had the firmament where water was. We also had the water in the lakes and the rivers and the streams. But we also had the water in the well that came from beneath the ground. And of course, so we had the earth and the sky and the heavens, but we also had what the Greeks taught us, Hades. That's where you would have to go on the river Styx, down into the earth. And that was sort of the mindset that they had for this image of heaven and hell. It was here, deep within the earth. It wasn't on some other planet, some other place. It was here. That was their mind. So Isaiah is painting with what he knows. He's painting with his words to create that image that shows us what life is like when heaven comes down. Picture it that way. That dome opens up. The dome opens up and there's fire like brushwood, and it's so hot that it boils water. Then we move on. You meet those who gladly do right, those who remember you and your ways, but you were angry and we sinned. This is the next picture that we have to look at. God looking at us, and it seems to have this look of disappointment on his face. Wow. The next picture that we see in this gallery, where the heavens have opened up, and then we see the picture of God who looks disappointed, is where we see God like a loving, benevolent father. A father that we have to really get closer to notice the details. Sometimes in a gallery, you stand back to take in the image, but in this particular one, we have to get a little closer to the picture for good reason. It says in Isaiah 64 chapter, verse 8, "O Lord, you are our Father." So we see a picture of a father that is approachable, not one to be feared. We are the clay, he says, and you are the potter. So this image has the father sitting at a potter's wheel. And look at his fingers. You can see bits of clay still clinging to his fingers in this picture. And who's the clay? You, me, all of us. We are the clay, and you are the potter. And then it ends in the same picture with this sense that the clay is asking, "Do not be angry, O Lord, and do not remember our sins forever. Remember, we are your people." That is the lighting of the candle of hope, right there in that image. And it's that image that lights the way to our final destination. Another artist in the line of Isaiah, but newer. He's known as the carpenter from Nazareth, Jesus, who paints a picture for us that we heard this morning, a picture that begins with, in those days after the suffering. So what does our first image look like? We see an image of the sky. We can make out the shape of the sun. We can make out the shape of the moon, but what's missing? Light. It's dark. And even the moon is dark. And we see in this picture, which is almost like a Van Gogh, we see stars falling from the heavens. Stars are falling from the heavens. Imagine what that looks like. And we also see in that somehow that the artist has painted power onto this canvas. How do we see the power? We see the power by the chaos and the force of the winds that seem to be coming from every direction, from the west and the east, from the north and from the south. And how do we see wind in a painting? How do you see that kind of force in your mind's eye as you look at that painting? With that image of a fig leaf that's withered and dying, swirling around. Which takes us to the next image in this part of the gallery, the fig tree itself. And the fig tree looks really dead. It looks like it's winter in this particular painting. Nothing much there, except as you get closer to it, you see some buds on the fig tree. And look more closely at those buds. What do you see coming out of the tip of the bud? Green. Life. Just a bit, not much, but it's there. And you can't stop it, can you? It tells us in that image that life will happen no matter what. That life springs forth, even out of the darkness and the chaos of everything swirling around in our lives. Oh, but there is still one image left for us as we start to leave the gallery. And it's a simple one. It's a candle burning. It's a fig leaf with a bloom just starting to open. And, just like our first image, there's a clock. There's a clock in this painting. We can tell it's a clock because it's got the hours listed on it in Roman numbers, but there are no hands on this clock. How do we tell what time it is on this clock? We can't. There's hope in the midst of the uncertainty of the time. If you ever go to a museum with my son, you never get out of it without going to the gift store. And most galleries are pretty smart and sneaky about how they do this, right? How do you usually get out of a display? You have to go through the museum bookstore. So you have to buy something. But today, you don't have to shop around too hard. You don't have to spend any of your own money either. Because today, the gift that we all receive is free. We get a little bud from the fig tree that we take and put in our pockets, put in our hearts, to remember that life is often chaotic. It never goes as we plan. Look at Schmidt. What about Schmidt? Nothing went as he had planned, and he was lost until he was able to discover that bloom. And much like Schmidt, we find ourselves at times wondering, what's the point? Why is it that we go through this? The pain and the loss, the struggle, when's it get better? And we think, oh, tomorrow will be better, and maybe tomorrow's better, but then it just gets bad again. What's the point? I don't know, is this a gallery you want to keep revisiting? No wonder they move their displays around. But no, we leave today with this promise of hope, that life springs eternal. And that's not to diminish the pain that we've just witnessed. More than that, it's to embrace it. It's to acknowledge it, to recognize it, that pain is what fuels us and propels us through the rest of the gallery, through the rest of our lives. So we leave the gallery this morning, having witnessed our lives on the screen. We've seen the words of Isaiah. We've seen the words of Jesus. We don't know the time, but we know that time is irrelevant when it comes to God, because we have eternal time. We have the eternal flame of hope burning in all directions. Signs and wonders. Read the tea leaves of our lives and see that it is so.